We're going to talk to Tom Hampson, licensed criminal investigator. Been doing that work for 50 years.
Wow.
But I just want to go back to play, before we talk to Tom, play a bite from what Cardinal Supich, released yesterday in response to the Raoul report, sawing sawdust, as I said, of the sexual abuse of children that occurred within the Catholic Church over the past 7 decades, but with no case in Raoul's report, according to Raoul, his 700-page report, more current than 15 or 20 years ago. He couldn't remember. This is what Supich said the church has done, the Chicago Archdiocese specifically, has done since 2006, because I want to get Tom Hampson to react to this.
Since 2006, we have maintained and continue to update a public list of those clerics of the Archdiocese determined through an independent investigation and review to have a substantiated allegation of sexual abuse of a minor against them. Further, we have worked with and encouraged religious orders who have full and exclusive access and rights to their files to publish lists of their members with substantiated allegations. Our website lists religious order priests who have ministered for the Archdiocese and were found by their orders to have substantiated allegations of child sexual abuse, no matter where and when the abuse occurred.
Now, that's not the whole ball of wax here, but on the transparency side, it's what's appropriate. So we'll start there with Tom Hampson, licensed criminal investigator, 50 years. Started back with the state of Illinois' Legislative Investigative Commission in the 70s, which was initially created to investigate organized crime, and that brought Tom into investigations involving child sexual abuse as well. He is also the founder of the Truth Alliance Foundation now, which works to prevent child abuse. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So what was your reaction to, not on the prevention side, which we'll talk about, but just on the transparency side for what has transpired and how the church is committed to being transparent going forward? Is that sufficient, or are there additional steps the church, as an example, should be taking in the interests of disclosure?
No, I think they've been pretty transparent about what's been going on since 2006. Initially, in 2006, 2007, it was like pulling teeth to get them to come out with any information. But over the last few years, they've been very transparent with incidents that have come up, and also keeping their website current as far as they know for the cases that they've got. Now, back in I investigated the Catholic Church in 2006, 2007 for DCFS. They brought me in to investigate the priests after it was after the Boston Globe came out with their expose about the church. And what's different now is back in 2006, 2007, their investigation process wasn't particularly good, but I understand since then it's been improved.
And what should be done, generally speaking, with the church and maybe what the church is doing on this front, and then generally speaking on the prevention side, preventing people who obviously have a proclivity to abuse children from getting into these institutions in the first place?
Well, they've done quite a few things. One thing that they've implemented is the Virtus program, which is they screen and train everybody, all the volunteers, all of the people that work with kids in the Catholic Church. This is something new since the Boston Globe report. They started doing this, and that's been a significant improvement. The one thing that I don't think they still do is they don't do adequate screening of the priests themselves. They don't, like the priests, for example, don't go through the Virtus program, or at least they didn't. They didn't think that was necessary, and I thought that was a mistake. But other than that, they seem to be on the right track.
Were you able? Sorry, Dan.
Well, and now compare what the church is doing with respect to their schools to what's happening in a school system like CPS, whereas we were talking about before you joined us, according to the Inspector General for the Chicago Public School System, his office opened 477 investigations into child abuse just in calendar year 2022.
Yeah, the problem of child sex abuse in public schools is far worse than it is in the church. That one of the things that's happened in public schools over the last 50 years is that the character requirements, for example, for teachers has declined over those years, whereas in the church, just since 2006, the character requirements for people that work in the Catholic Church with kids has been strengthened. It's been increased. They've paid more attention to the individual's overall conduct, whereas in the public schools they're not.
Well, with this 696-page report that Kwame Raoul released yesterday or unveiled to reporters, why did it take 5 years for this investigation, and why did they relitigate decades-old cases?
Well, I don't know. There really isn't. I haven't had a chance to thoroughly review the whole thing. I've skimmed through the entire report, but it's very heavy on graphics and short on information. There's nothing in the report that I saw that looks at all new. All of the information that I read is very familiar. It was already available publicly back in 2006. It really has not added anything to our understanding of what's going on in the Catholic Church.
And so
even the section on investigations, they say that the problems with the investigations, I think they were off base on that section, and they really don't even distinguish the different ways the investigations have changed over the years. For example, in 2006, one of my criticisms of the way they were doing investigations was they would interview the victim and also the priest, but they wouldn't do any interviews of other people. They wouldn't go out and look for potential witnesses like clerks and secretaries in or maintenance workers in the rectories. They wouldn't seek out information which might have added to their understanding of what was going on, and also maybe even caught some other priests that were involved in improper conduct. They didn't do that. I think they've improved that process now, but it really was a pretty pathetic investigation in 2006.
All right. So now, in the early 2000s, there was this report by University of, I think she's at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, Carol Shakeshaft. I don't know where she was at the time, but she's at VCU now, I believe. Anyway, this was commissioned by the Department of Education, and we've mentioned it on the show before in discussion of this topic. And she essentially concluded, among other things, that about 10% of public school students in America are sexually abused in some way in school every year. 10%, I mean, that's 5 million kids. And there was an updating of the study that she did in the early part of the century, just a few years ago, that essentially confirmed the findings in the original study. Did you believe those conclusions? And if so, is there any evidence that the public schools, government school systems, big cities and small towns, I mean, across the board, have taken any steps similar to what the Catholic Church has?
Well, no, they're not. They're not doing it at all. In fact, they're going. Like I said, they're going in the opposite direction. They're requiring less and less of the teachers. For example, years ago, teachers didn't share their private life with the kids. So you didn't even know if they were married, other than calling them Miss or Mrs. You didn't know anything about their private life. They didn't have any social media. There wasn't any interaction with the kids. And today, it's like their whole life is an open book. This isn't a good thing to have teachers function as friends of the children. They're there to educate them, not become their friends. And so I think that becomes more of a familiarity that invites the kind of intimacy you don't want to have between an adult and a child.
But the Shake Shaft findings, you believe those to be ballpark?
Oh, absolutely. They're correct. In fact, there was one just earlier this year that came out. It was called "The Nature and Scope of Educator Misconduct in K-12," that confirmed the report. Their finding was that it's 11.7%, not the 10.6 that Carol Shake had. But I think statistically, it's not a particularly significant difference. However, and that was just published in 2023.
So if you have millions of kids being sexually abused writ large in K through 12 education, how do you explain the lack of scrutiny, evasive action being taken by school districts, dialogue generally?
I can't explain it. Even in 2004, when Carol Shakeshaft came out with that report, it was right after the Boston Globe triggered the nationwide look at the churches, and Carol Shakeshaft said the problem in public schools was 100 times worse than it was in the Catholic Church, and there was nothing said. It was crickets. There was silence about it, and nothing has been done to deal with that problem anywhere in the country in protecting children. It's really pretty pathetic.
I know, as I mentioned at the outset, you started out looking at organized crime, and it brought you into places where you were investigating, as you have, people accused of or suspected of being engaged in sexual abuse of children. So what did you learn from all those years and all those investigations about child predators?
Predators go where the prey is, and with children, if they're interested in children, the most prevalent place they'll try to show up is in the schools, and they will gravitate toward the easiest place that they can get into. So if the screening requirements, the more lax the screening requirements, that's where they're going to go. They go to schools. They get involved with sports programs. They volunteer for opportunities to minister to people overseas where there's been a disaster. Wherever they can have access to children, unfettered access to children, that's where you'll find them. And so unless you realize that and take steps to identify them and screen them out, you're going to have problems. And I think that's what the church learned a long time ago, and the schools still haven't learned it.
And when schools say, "Hey, Tom, we do criminal background checks on everyone," you say what?
Means nothing. Well, it means a little bit but the problem is that less than 2% of predators are ever caught, ever. 98% of predators never are encountered. They never become identified. Nobody ever knows that they even exist. Wow. Because most of the victims of child sexual abuse never tell anybody about it. There's 60 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse in the United States, and everybody knows them, but very, very often some of your closest friends have been sexually abused and you don't even know it.
And you also told me when we spoke off the air about the difficulty in these investigations now as compared to when you started, when the programs on TV were different, the relationship between teachers and students were different, which you mentioned, the what was going on in classrooms and in libraries was different. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, back in the 70s, there was it was easier to distinguish between allegations that were real and allegations that were false, because real allegations, they could be very descriptive about what happened to them, versus the false allegations, they were very vague, or they didn't have the right details on the different activities that they engage in. But today, with with how sexualized their culture has become, they can easily describe having a sexual relationship with somebody that is based on something they saw on TV, because they accurately show people engaging in sexual activity, all manner of sexual activity, even in broadcast TV, not to mention cable. Cable is even the worst kind. Plus, there's just a plethora of porn sites, risque images all over the internet. Wikipedia is a pornographic site.
Really? And what about like even state lawmakers in Minnesota are trying to normalize pedophiles? What's your reaction to that?
Minor
It's
attracted
just
persons.
outrageous. Yeah, in fact, that's going to be happening. It's 2S LGBTQQIA plus. Pretty soon they're going to be adding MAP for minor attracted person, which is just disgusting. There's no justification for that at all, and the idea that these are different identities is ridiculous. This is all made up stuff by John Money and Alfred Kinsey.
He is Tom Hampson, licensed criminal investigator, 50 years. State of Illinois Legislative Investigative Commission is where he started. And he is now the founder of the Truth Alliance Foundation, which seeks to prevent child abuse and child sexual abuse in particular. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Have you been struggling to find an easy, safe, and secure document